Hello, welcome back. It's been a busy day here in this corner. Um, and we're going to talk about nutrient cycles today. And I'm sure a lot of people are like, wow, that sounds boring. And I can understand that. You're kind of looking at a cycle or a circle or something. So I can understand why you would think that this is boring. Maybe because it doesn't, it's not something you can hold on to and look at. But these nutrient cycles, or sometimes they're called biogeochemical cycles, bio, life, geo, earth, chemical, chemical cycles, biogeochemical cycles. They are actually very important, and they are sort of like this big gear that keeps everything on Earth kind of turning and keeping like sort of a balance through everything, through the biotic and abiotic factors of the ecosystem, and the whole planet. They're very, very important. And when we talk about in the future, when we talk about climate change and other negative impacts humans are having on the environment, one big thought is they're affecting these biogeochemical cycles in such a way they're throwing them off balance, which is messing up the whole earth. So that's why we need to talk about them. It's important that you guys understand how things go on earth and how these nutrients get from the air or the water or the, the ground and into us and then back to those different places. If we were in class, I've got these like little games we can play and stuff. Maybe I will try to figure out how we can do it online. I don't know. I'll work on it. Okay. I'm not that kind of tech savvy. I'll work on it. I'll figure something out for us to do. Okay. So I'm trying. I promise you I'm trying. Okay. Let's try to look at these nutrient cycles. Wow. So again, these cycles show how elements or certain molecules move, or atoms of certain molecules move through Earth, through Earth's air, the atmosphere, through the water, through the soil, through living things, how they move and where do they go and how do they change? How do they get into us? You're telling me stuff that was in soil is in me? Yes. You're telling me like parts of the air are in me besides my lungs? Yes. Okay. So we could get super fancy and talk about laws of thermodynamics and laws of the universe, but let's just say new stuff doesn't appear on Earth. It doesn't. I can't just be like, okay, I've got some new water that I made. All the carbon, all the water, all the nitrogen, etc., that's here on Earth right now has all been recycled since the formation of Earth 4.6 billion years ago. So the water that's literally here in my lovely can, I don't know, I couldn't think of the word, water bottle, that's been there like forever. Okay, so this water has been in plants or in animals, in dinosaurs, recycled and gone through them. I don't know how many times, countless times. It's been in the air, it's been in the ocean, it's been in a lake, it's been in a pond, it's probably been in a mountain, it's probably been in other living things. Now it's going to go into me. Okay, and then it will leave my body and then get recycled and go into something else again. Okay, same thing with the carbon in the carbon dioxide you're breathing out, or the carbon that's in your cells, or the nitrogen that's in our bodies, like in our muscles and in our DNA. That was in other living things. That was in the food you ate. That was in the soil. That was in the air. Now it's in you. Okay? And it's not going to go away. It gets recycled again. That's why these cycles are cool. I need that water, and they're important. So let's look at a cycle you know. What cycle is it? You know it. Think about it for just a second while I take a drink of water. Conveniently placed water, because this is the water cycle. I don't have it labeled. We would label it in class together. You can pause this video and see if you can take time to label these things yourself. So let's talk about it. So we have a lake or a stream, and we have liquid water that's then going to evaporate and form into a cloud. So it's going to evaporate because of warmth from the sun. Then it will condense and form a cloud. So we would kind of draw clouds, and we would write condensation. Then here we see water coming out of the clouds as rain. It could come out as rain, sleet, snow, hail. That's precipitation. So there you see precipitation, and then that water can then run off into like the lake or stream, or infiltrate and seep into the soil and become groundwater. Also, I forgot to mention here with evaporation, sorry, notice this nice arrow coming out of the plants. Plants kind of, I don't know, I guess you can call it sweat. It's not really. It's called transpiration. That's a fancy word. So transpiration is like plants releasing some water or like sweating. So a lot of times the people will squish that evaporation and transpiration into one word and call it evapotranspiration. But that's what that means, and that's why the arrow is coming from the plants as well. So there's the water cycle. If I drink water, eventually it's going to come out of me. I'll sweat it out. You'll pee it out. Urinate. Okay, so you'll pee it out. Well, then where does it go? It gets flushed down the toilet. Well, where does it go from there? To a water treatment plant. Well, where does it go from there? It can go back to being a municipal water source, or it can go back into where we are, the river. Okay, so fish can drink that, animals can drink that, plants can soak it up. So that water, after it comes out of me, will go somewhere else, and then it will come out of that living thing and go somewhere else again. You're not making new water on Earth. Okay, it's not new. It's all recycled. All recycled. So what about the carbon cycle? Oh, I'll probably have to try to talk over where my head is. I totally recommend you looking at the notes that I have provided to you on Google Classroom. This is here. You can click through it, look at it, see the words that are going to be covered up by my head. Sorry, my head's here. But I wanted you to see me in case, because I don't know. Here I am. All right, so who cares about the carbon cycle? That's boring. Boring! Yeah, I know. I know what goes on. You should. This is how carbon, which makes up a lot of the food that we eat, moves from the air and from plants and from animals into us, and then goes back into the air. So we're going to talk about how this can connect to photosynthesis and respiration, how this can connect to global warming. Let's go through the cycle because I've got a lot of blanks up here. Let's fill them in. So we have CO2 in the atmosphere, carbon dioxide. So you'll hear me either say CO2 probably or carbon dioxide. That's the same thing. It's in the air around us. There's not that much. I mean, it's getting more and more, but there's really not that much. There's probably now about 400 parts per million. When I was your age, there was like 300 some, like maybe 350 or 330, somewhere around there. I don't remember. I have to look it up depending on what year I was in high school. So it has increased, even though the number isn't that big, it has increased a large percentage amount in a very short amount of time, and that's bad. We're not going to talk about that today, but I'm letting you know that that's bad. So CO2 is in the air. Do you breathe that in? No. I mean, you breathe in air, but our bodies use oxygen, and we breathe out CO2. We'll get to that. Plants are and algae and cyanobacteria, they're what takes in CO2. They breathe it in. For what? For photosynthesis. Then you'll have these primary consumers. Yum, yum, yum. They'll eat plants. Sometimes you're a primary consumer if you eat a plant. Probably a lot of the time, maybe more than we should. We're the higher level consumer where we will eat meat. We'll eat one of those herbivores, like you'll eat hamburger or a chicken or whatever. So then we breathe out. Oh, I didn't get to that. Okay, well, then like if we're talking about an animal, come on. If we're talking about an animal, they can die and become detritus, like I talked to you last time about. And some decomposers can come and convert us into something else. Or we can breathe out. So they'll breathe out, we'll breathe out. That's the products of cellular respiration. One of them, it happens when we breathe out. And that's CO2. They can go back to the air. So then that cycle sort of goes back again. Well, look here. I got to try to cover up that little factory, cover up that part and that arrow that we haven't talked about yet. Here we have a nice complete cycle. And everything's a-okay. Here we have our carbon cycle. Well, since the Industrial Revolution, we've started burning fossil fuels and wood, and that adds more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So we've actually turned this carbon cycle off balance. The arrow going up to the atmosphere is now larger than the arrow that would take it out. And then to increase the problem, as we burn things, we're cutting down the forests that take the CO2 out. So when people talk about global climate change and global warming, carbon dioxide, this is what they're talking about. We're throwing this carbon cycle off balance, and that is bad. We're not going to really get into that whole thing today. We'll talk about it later, but I want you to be aware. You could always go back and watch this part again to reference what I'm talking about with the carbon cycle. The last thing we're going to talk today is about the nitrogen cycle. This one's a little bit more complex because there's a lot more moving parts to it. I'm going to put up extra video links. I really encourage you to watch other videos about the nitrogen cycle. It can be complex. We're going to do some activities in class about it. So I want you to know a little bit about it, and we'll get more into details. This shows how nitrogen moves from the air into the soil and into us. Are you breathing in nitrogen right now? For respiration, you're using oxygen. When we breathe in all the air that's around us. Our bodies use the nitrogen. Our bodies use the oxygen. I wish I had an editor. Our bodies use the oxygen that's in the air, not the nitrogen or CO2 or carbon monoxide or water vapor or anything else that's in the air. We only use the oxygen. Okay, so when you breathe in, yeah, the nitrogen might go in and you just breathe it right back out. We can't breathe in nitrogen and use it. What's neat about the nitrogen cycle is go back two videos, and it includes some cool symbiotic relationships. Let's talk about it and look at a picture. I've tried to pick a simplified picture. This is simple. Yeah, I've tried to pick a simplified picture of the nitrogen cycle so we can just get a brief overview. And I really encourage you to watch other videos that go into detail about it because I'm not going to go into great detail. Here we have nitrogen in our air. It actually makes up 70%-ish of the air around us. So most of the air around us is nitrogen, and we can't use it. It's not in any usable form. It makes up you. It's important to you and your body. We can't use the nitrogen from the air. Well, how do we get it? Okay, there's a process called nitrogen fixation. That happens through a couple different ways. One really interesting way is lightning. Lightning can change the nitrogen and change the form and cause that molecule to change and become a different form of nitrogen. So the other way are these nitrogen fixing bacteria. They can change that nitrogen, N2, into NH3. Okay. So that's still not really a form that we can use. You have nitrogen fixing bacteria, then you have nitrifying bacteria. So there's two different types of bacteria involved. And by the way, if these bacteria did not exist, we would not be here. We need nitrogen. These guys turn nitrogen into a form that we'll eventually be able to get. So thanks, nitrogen fixing and nitrifying bacteria. I appreciate you. So some of these nitrogen fixing and nitrifying bacteria actually have a symbiotic relationship with who? Plants. They live in the roots of some plants. So plants will send their sugar from photosynthesis down to the roots, and they'll actually feed the bacteria that live in their roots, and the bacteria provide them a source of nitrogen. So again, how do we get this nitrogen? It gets nitrified into NO3, and it gets assimilated or taken up by plants. So plants can get this form of nitrogen, and they suck it up into their roots, and they use it, and they make it part of their bodies and part of their leaves. And then how do we get it? Either we will eat plants, or an animal will eat the plants, and then we eat the animal. So we're getting that nitrogen that was in the air, then fixed by some type of bacteria, then nitrified, then taken up by a plant and assimilated. By the way, the process of either eating something and getting that nitrogen or absorbing the nitrogen in this form is called assimilation. We're going to talk about that in class. We're going to use that in class. So then what's going to happen to that nitrogen? How does it get back in the air? Well, it can get pooped out and changed into different forms, or you have denitrifying bacteria that will turn it right back. So these bacteria do the opposite of these bacteria. I realize that that cycle is a little complex. Like I said, I really encourage you to watch some more videos about it to get a better grasp of it. For your class, for us, we don't need to memorize every single step of the nitrogen cycle. However, you need to have the understanding of we need nitrogen. We can't breathe it in. We don't get it from the air. We have to get it from plants and animals. How do they get it? Bacteria transform nitrogen into a form plants can use. That's the big overall idea you need to understand. You need to understand that for this class. Okay, so cool that we don't have to memorize a ton of stuff, but we need to know and understand the big idea. And then to just go along with what I was talking about with the carbon cycle, with the nitrogen cycle, we also are throwing that off balance when we add extra fertilizer to the soil. A lot of the fertilizers we use in farming practices are nitrogen-based fertilizer. So we're adding extra nitrogen into this cycle. We throw it off balance. Oops, that causes effects down the line. So when we talk about the human impact on the environment, we'll refer back to the carbon cycle, to the water cycle, to the nitrogen cycle. So it's important that you have an understanding of what these things are and what goes on. Okay, so I hope that helps as an overview of these three cycles, because we're going to be talking about them and doing some activities in class. Even though it's online, we're still going to be doing some activities. So I hope that helps you. And like I said, I will throw some links to some really excellent videos about these cycles for you. All right, bye. For real, bye.